Hi, I'm Chef Rick Tarentino. You might recognize me from Home Shopping Network or go to my website at www.chefricktarentino.com. Today, we're going to cook beef stew noodle soup. It's a combination of my favorite beef stew with a twist, adding noodles and broth at the end. Stay tuned because this recipe is great. Now we've cooked our noodles. You can use any kind of pasta, egg, wheat, or rice. You're going to add that into any stew to make this wonderful dish. We're going to start with our basic mirepoix, which is our onions, carrots, and celery. We're going to saute those to get them brown and nice and flavorful by caramelizing them. So I'm just going to do a rough chop on my celery, about a ½ inch thick. Works well. The beef stew is kind of rustic, so I don't want it too uniform. Then I'm going to take some of my onion, same thing, about a ½ inch thick. That looks nice. Okay, I'm going to do my baby carrots whole, but I'm going to saute all this first in my pan to get it nice and caramelized. Okay, we're going to add in a little olive oil now that our pan is hot. And we'll add in our onions and our celery. That's going to come nice and brown. We're going to add just a little bit of salt and pepper. I like to use a low sodium salt, like Ocean's Flavor, something that has less sodium, a little bit healthier for you. As you can see, it's already starting to caramelize right here on the bottom. That's what we're looking for. We're going to add in the carrots. We're going to let that brown for maybe 3 minutes just to get those onions nice and opaque or translucent. Look at that. Starting to look really good. While that browns, I'm going to dice up some garlic to add into that. We've got about 4 cloves of garlic. Just going to smash them down and then dice them up. Again, I want a rough cut, not too small and uniform. You notice as I move my knife around, I'm not keeping it straight so that they're all different size cuts, different shapes. Then I'm going to go ahead and add that in. Going to give it a stir. Look at that. That's exactly what we want to happen. See all those brown bits? That's called the font that's forming on the bottom of the pan. That's going to add all kinds of flavor to our beef stew. Okay, next we're going to do our beef or our stew meat. So I've got about a pound and a half of stew meat right here. And you're going to chop it up into bite-sized pieces so that it's easy to eat when you serve it. And very important that when you cut it, you want to cut it across the grain. So the grain's going this way, and I'm cutting it this way so that the meat is very tender when it cooks. It helps tenderize the meat. Okay, I've got about a pound and a half of stew meat here. To that, I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons of flour, and maybe an eighth or a half a tablespoon salt and pepper. I'm going to mix that together to coat my meat evenly. That's going to give it a nice brown texture when I add it into my pan. Add a touch more oil, keep it from sticking. Then I'm going to add this right into the center. Don't worry about that flour because that extra flour is going to help to thicken our beef stew. Now we're going to brown that to get a nice brown texture on our meat. Then we're going to combine all this ingredients with our seasoning into our slow cooker and get our beef stew started. As you can see, our meat's getting nice and brown, and I'm going to move it aside for a minute because I want you to see the font forming. That font right there is what we're going to deglaze off the pan, and that's going to add all that rich flavor. A little browning occurring on our meat. That's what we wanted for flavor. Going to add in about a ½ a cup, quarter of a cup of our beef stock. And if you look closely, you'll notice the brown fondant starting to deglaze off the pan. It's going to release from the pan, from the steam. And it's going to form sort of a gravy right there. That's going to be the basis of our beef stew right there. Now we're going to add this into our stock pot. We're going to add 2 tablespoons of oil. Then our diced potato. I've got a potato diced up about 1 inch or a ½ inch cubes. Then I'm going to add in some seasonings. Now I'm going to keep my rosemary whole because I want to be able to pull it out later, and my thyme as well. That way it'll add the seasoning, but I won't have the herbs or the sticks in there. I'm going to add in a couple of bay leaves, and then lastly, about a teaspoon of thyme. Our beef stock, about 4 cups. That's already looking good in there. And to that, we're going to add our beef and our vegetables. And you can see all that brown gravy kind of formed in there. That's going to add all that flavor we were talking about. All that brown flavor that's in there. And you can see our caramelized onions right in here. It's all that sweetness and the sugar that came out of the onions that's going to add that deep, rich onion flavor, which won't be very acidy at all. It'll be actually sweet. That's what slow cooking does. It brings out all those sugars. It also helps tenderize the meat because by cooking at 160 degrees, 180 degrees, the bonds in the meat fiber actually turn to gelatin and get soft. And that's where you get that fork tender beef stew. Now we're going to cook that covered for 4 to 6 hours. Feel free to do it before you go to work. It'll be ready when you come home. We're going to start by adding some noodles in the bottom. Then we're going to add in some of our beef stew. You can use any beef stew recipe that you like. I'm going to add in our meat and vegetables. And then make sure we add a good scoop of broth in there. I like to serve this with a little hearty bread so you can suck up all that good juice. And here's my chef tip. Finish it with a drizzle of extra virgin olive oil to add that last bit of flavor and taste. I'm Chef Rick Tarentino. Bon appetit.